The thing she carried in her belly was never a real sterling. That was the last thing my father-in-law said to me, cold, like he was spitting dust instead of words. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just stood there frozen in the hospital hallway that still smelled like antiseptic and grief. And in that silence, something in me broke. But not the way they hoped. It's funny how a single sentence can start a war you never planned to fight. Before we dive in, let me know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The bench was colder than I expected. I sat on the edge of it, stiff-backed, a half-wrapped sandwich in my lap, and a wind that wouldn't quit pressing into my spine. Minneapolis in late October had a way of making you feel exposed, like the air was watching. Dry leaves scratched their way across the concrete, like they had somewhere more important to be. I didn't. I hadn't eaten since the day before. I wasn't hungry, not really. I chewed because it was what you do. Habit, survival. The sandwich turkey mustard stale bread had been in my coat pocket since morning, still cold, just like everything else. Across the path, an older man sat on the opposite bench. He had 3 coats on and none of them zipped. His face was the color of sidewalk eyes, clear but distant, like someone who used to belong to a different world. I wouldn't have noticed him if it hadn't been for the way he watched me, not with pity, not with judgment, just stillness. He didn't ask. I tore the sandwich in 2 and crossed the path, held one half out. He blinked, nodded once, took it without a word. We sat like that for a while, not speaking, just chewing, letting the wind carry the weight of whatever was too heavy for either of us to say out loud. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't think he'd answer if I had. When he finished eating, he pulled something from his inside coat pocket, an old receipt, maybe a napkin folded once, then again. He scribbled a number, then he handed it to me and said, "When you need a way out, call." That was it. He didn't wait for a reaction, just leaned back and closed his eyes like he hadn't said anything strange at all. I stared at the paper. The number was written in black pen, shaky but deliberate. No name, just a line. I didn't understand why he gave it to me. I didn't know what it meant, but I tucked it into the coin pocket of my wallet behind the photo I hadn't dared look at for weeks. A gust of wind picked up. I turned my face to it. The trees looked tired, bare, thin, like they'd already let go of too much. My chest ached the way it had since that day in the hospital, since that voice, cold, precise, cut through the silence and said, what she carried was never a sterling. That sentence had cracked something inside me I hadn't figured out how to seal. I still heard it when I blinked too long. I still saw the look on Colt's face, stone turned away like I'd never been there at all. I looked across the path again. The bench was empty. My hand tightened around the house key as I slid it into the lock. It still turned clean like nothing had changed. I didn't knock, just pushed the door open and stepped inside the house that smelled of roasted garlic lemon polish and 1,000 quiet Sunday afternoons. The floor groaned at the same spot near the threshold left side just past the faded welcome mat. A weary, familiar sound. She was already in the kitchen. My mother stood over a pot on the stove, her back slightly bent, silver hair tied in a bun that always unraveled by dinner time. Steam rose in loose spirals above the pot. Chicken ginger rice. Her quiet recipe for emergencies. She didn't look up when I came in, just said gently like she'd been waiting, "There's enough for both." I dropped my bag by the hallway table and walked in. The air felt warm, too warm after the bite of October wind, and smelled safe in a way that made something in my chest want a splinter. I didn't speak. Neither did she. She ladled soup into a ceramic bowl and slid it across the table to me. No questions, no remarks, just a napkin, a spoon, and her footsteps moving back toward the laundry basket waiting in the living room. The soup was too hot, but I sipped anyway. My lips burned, but I didn't stop. Something about the salt, the warmth, the silence, it felt like oxygen after drowning. From the corner of my eye, I saw her folding towels. Her hands moved with a rhythm that hadn't changed since I was 8. Neat lines, tight corners. Like if the towels were perfect, maybe something in the world would be too. I reached into my bag and pulled out the wooden box I'd carried across 3 states. Small, square, worn smooth from being handled too often. The hinges squeaked when I opened it, but she didn't turn. Inside, wrapped in a soft scrap of cloth, was Eli's hospital bracelet. It was the only thing they let me keep. Pale blue plastic, the letters faded but legible. Eli Morley. Not Sterling. They hadn't even bothered to change it on the birth certificate. I told them I didn't care, but that wasn't true. I cared so much it made my teeth ache. I held the bracelet a moment longer than I meant to, then closed the lid and slid the box back into the bag. Behind me, she asked, "Your husband not coming?" I didn't turn, just stared at the steam rising from my bowl. I didn't call. She didn't ask why. I think she knew not to, or maybe she simply respected silence in the way only mothers who have survived their own heartbreaks can. After the audit, things shifted fast. One day, I was running logistics for Sterling Group coordinating billion-dollar partnerships. The next, I was being questioned in a boardroom full of men who wouldn't meet my eyes. Gregory Sterling stood at the head of the table, lips pressed into a line, fingers steepled like a priest delivering a verdict. "I'm afraid the breach traces back to your access level, Lena," he said with the calm precision of a man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. "You understand how serious this is. I wasn't fired. I was replaced. Quietly, efficiently, like changing the name on a door." The keycard stopped working before anyone told me. I stood outside the main entrance, waving it at the scanner until the red light flashed 3 times and buzzed. A janitor let me in through the back. He looked confused, like he almost didn't recognize me. At home, Colt avoided my eyes. I asked him once, "Do you believe I did it?" He said nothing, but I heard what his silence screamed. No one from his family called. Not after the story leaked. Not after the funeral. Not when I packed my things in a rental car and drove 600 miles south. I passed through 3 states and slept in gas station parking lots just to avoid the possibility of hearing my name spoken with pity. The worst part wasn't the isolation. It was the erasure. At Sterling family functions, my place card read, "Mrs. Colt Sterling," not Lena, never Lena, like I'd been borrowed, temporary, disposable. My friends, well, the people I thought were friends, stopped responding to texts. One even blocked me. I saw it clear as day, message not delivered. I didn't try again. The soup had cooled. I took another bite just to fill the quiet. She returned to the kitchen, placed the folded towels on a chair, and leaned slightly against the counter. "I know it hurts," she said almost to herself. I didn't answer. My voice didn't trust itself. Outside, a car passed slowly, its headlights cutting across the kitchen wall. I watched the shadows flicker, stretch, disappear. My hands rested flat on the table, one over the other, pressing down like maybe if I held still enough, the grief would forget I was here. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like a quilt pulled over someone who's finally stopped shivering. The next morning, I found myself walking toward Town Coat, pulled close against the wind. The bell above the cafe door jingled when I pushed it open. I pulled my coat tighter and scanned the tables. She sat near the window, sipping something dark from a paper cup. Her posture was straight shoulders tucked tightly under a sharp navy blazer, the same style she wore back when we both had glass offices and assistant calendars. I forced a smile as I stepped closer, my cheeks aching with the effort. "Hi, Meredith." She looked up, blinked like she was trying to place me, then offered a polite nod. Not warm, not cold. "Lena? Wow, you look." She paused. "It's been a while." I sat down without waiting to be invited. The table between us felt like a canyon. I could still remember the way we used to whisper about budgets, the way she'd roll her eyes during board meetings, tap notes into her phone with quick fingers. Now her hand stayed wrapped around the cup like it was something sacred. "I just wanted to talk." "Not long," I said quickly. "I know things are complicated, but I thought maybe if someone on the inside could just clarify there's a narrative going around and it's not—" I swallowed. "It's not true." Meredith glanced around. She leaned in slightly but didn't lower her voice out of sympathy, more like fear. "You shouldn't have come here." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Her eyes flicked to the corner where a man in a suit sipped espresso, pretending not to notice us. "They've closed you out, Lena. Not just at Sterling. All of it. Every firm that matters." "I didn't do anything wrong," I said barely above a whisper. "I know." Her voice cracked, then steadied. "But it doesn't matter. You've been locked out. Officially, they say nothing. Unofficially, no one wants to touch this. Or you." She stood quickly, smoothing her blazer. "I have to go. I'm sorry." Then softer. "Take care of yourself." I watched her walk away like I was watching someone carry the last box of my old life out the back door. Later, I stopped by the grocery store, half hoping the routine would calm me down. I picked up only what I needed: bread, eggs, a small bottle of milk. I didn't even glance at the extras. Just the basics, like I was building a life out of survival rations. At the checkout, I slid my card. Declined. I tried another. Declined again. The cashier was a young woman with dark lipstick and a chipped name tag. She chewed gum and waited unimpressed. "I'll pay cash," I mumbled, fishing crumpled bills from my coat pocket, the last of what I had. It barely covered the total. As she counted out change, she tilted her head slightly and asked not kindly, "Aren't you Mrs. Sterling?" "You guys don't carry cards anymore." There was no malice in her tone, just curiosity coated in sarcasm. It hit harder than if she'd yelled. My hands trembled as I stuffed the receipt into my bag. Outside, the wind scraped against my face. I walked fast, arms crossed, eyes on the sidewalk. My breath came shallow, not from cold, but from the tightening in my chest that had nothing to do with weather. Back at my mother's, I slammed the door harder than I meant to. She looked up from the newspaper but said nothing. I stood there, fists clenched. "They didn't just take Eli," I said, voice raw. "They're still taking, one piece at a time." She folded the paper slowly, set it on the table. I thought she might respond. Instead, she just stood and walked toward the kitchen. I followed. I went to see Meredith. I continued. "They've blacklisted me. No job, no access, nothing. And at the store, I paused. They all still see me as one of them, but I'm not anymore. I'm not even me." She didn't speak right away, just pulled down 2 mugs, filled them with hot water, and tea bags, slid one toward me. I sat down hard, shoulders shaking. I don't think I exist to them unless I'm silent, and even then they still erase me. I wrapped my hands around the mug. I tried being quiet. I tried being polite. I let them write over my name, over my job, over my kid, and now they're erasing everything else. Steam curled up around my face, the scent of mint, sharp and grounding. Her voice when it came was low. "I know what it's like to be invisible." "But you're not gone, Lena. Not yet." I looked at her across the table. For the first time, I didn't just see my mother, I saw someone who had once been on fire and learned how to walk through the ashes without losing her shape. Later, when the house had gone quiet, my phone lit up on the counter. The number blinked for the 3rd time. No name. Just a Minnesota area code and a silence that stretched too long after I answered. Then finally the voice. "It's time." It was raspy sandpaper layered over gravel, but I recognized it, the man from the park, the one with the eyes that had seen too much and still watched everything. I hadn't called the number he gave me. I hadn't even looked at it since that afternoon, but somehow he knew when to reach me. "Meet me," he said, "where your husband's family used to celebrate themselves." The line went dead before I could ask another question. The old family diner sat at the edge of town, just past the 2nd overpass, tucked between a faded gas station and a lot filled with broken-down snowmobiles. It hadn't served pancakes or shrimp cocktails in years, but the neon sign still flickered Sterling's in uneven green light. The windows were dust-streaked and cracked the door stubborn against the push of my palm. Inside, the air was stale old grease paper napkins and something sour. Tables stood half-covered with discolored cloths. Chairs, once polished to shine, now leaned unevenly on warped tiles. He sat at the booth farthest from the window in the shadow of a cracked wall mirror that had once reflected laughter and raised glasses. Now it held only dim light and ghosted outlines of better years. Arthur Sterling. He wore a brown wool coat with frayed cuffs, a cap pulled low, but his presence was unmistakable. His hands, veined and weathered, rested on a manila folder. He didn't smile when I slid into the seat across from him. "I thought you were dead," I said. "In a way I was," he replied, pushing the folder slightly forward. "Just not in the way they'd hoped. I didn't touch it yet. I wanted to understand what I was looking at before I let my fingers near it." He studied me, not with warmth, but with calculation, like a chess player appraising an unexpected opponent. "I built this company," he began. "Sterling Group wasn't born with Gregory. It came from hard work, long nights, and knowing when to listen more than speak. That's how I made it grow, until your father-in-law decided it should be his. You're saying he stole it from you. I'm saying he knew how to cut throats without drawing blood. I handed over control thinking I was retiring with dignity. Turned out I was just stepping aside for the executioner." He leaned in. I watched him burn bridges while polishing silverware, but no one cared, because Sterling men are untouchable, unless they get sloppy. And Gregory, he's gotten sloppy. I finally opened the folder. Inside were scanned contracts, inter-office memos, notes scribbled in margins, names I recognized, dates that coincided with meetings I'd once been excluded from. At the top of one document, my name was faintly highlighted red ink circling a server login. My access, my downfall. "I kept digging after they shut me out," Arthur said. "Thought maybe someone would care. A board member, a journalist, even my own grandson. But I realized I didn't need someone who cared. I needed someone who was angry. You picked me because I shared a sandwich. I picked you because no one else looked me in the eye. And when I told you the truth was still an option, you didn't laugh." He slid a second folder across the table, thinner this time. "That one's for you. Condensed version. Enough to make someone listen if they know what they're looking at. I didn't reach for it." He studied me for a long beat, then said quieter, "They erased your name. The same way they erased mine. But I don't need revenge. I need memory. I need truth. I need someone still standing who knows what it cost." "I'm not strong enough," I said almost too quickly. "No," he answered. "You're just not sure if it's worth it yet." Outside, the wind picked up brushing dry leaves against the diner window like small, frantic hands. He stood slowly, joint stiff, the table groaning beneath his weight. "Take the folder or leave it. But if you walk away, you'll keep bleeding in silence. If you open it, just know you'll be holding a match." I stayed seated, the folder under my hand, now weightless and heavy at once. He moved past me, his coat sweeping dust from the floor as he walked to the door. Just before he stepped out, he turned his head slightly. I never needed pity, Lena. I needed a mirror. Then the bell above the door gave one tired jingle, and he was gone. I carried the folder home its edges, digging into my palm as if it wanted to remind me it was still there. By the time I reached the kitchen, rain was sliding down the window in lazy streaks, catching the amber glow of the porch light as it pooled on the sill. The clock above the stove clicked louder at night, or maybe it only seemed that way when sleep wouldn't come. I stood at the counter with a mug of lukewarm tea, watching steam curl into nothing. My mother sat at the table behind me, knitting needles clinking softly in the hush. "I've been thinking about suing them," I said, still facing the window. "If I did, would you think I'm crazy?" Her needles paused mid-stitch, but she didn't look up. Crazy's a word people use when they're scared of women doing hard things. I turned. "So you think I should do it?" Darlene exhaled, tugging the yarn taut. "I think you need to decide what winning looks like." I didn't answer. My hands gripped the mug tighter. "You go to court, maybe you prove something. Maybe they pay. Maybe people listen," she said. "But after all that, Eli's still gone. They still said what they said. They still acted like you were dirt on their designer shoes." Does a judge's ruling clean that off? The words hit too close. So that's a no. She finally looked at me. Calm. Measured. It's not a no. It's a question. Can you walk through fire and still come out yourself? I didn't speak again that night. At dawn, the rain slowed to a mist that hung like breath on glass. I came downstairs expecting the house to be quiet, but on the kitchen table was a weathered envelope edges, curled the paper yellowed from years tucked away. Inside were old medical records, my father's, discharge summaries, emergency room notes. One document had Gregory Sterling's name stamped at the bottom next to the hospital's refusal to authorize treatment. Coverage. Insufficient for non-emergency intervention, it read. I stared at the date. I was 8 years old. That week, I remembered Mom coming home with blood on her coat, crying without a sound. She stepped out of her bedroom and met my eyes. You thought I didn't know who Gregory was, she said quietly. But I knew. I just wanted better for you than revenge. A lump rose in my throat. I swallowed it down with nothing. Before I could respond, a car door slammed outside. I walked to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. Colt. He hadn't changed much, still wearing his family-like armor. Tan coat, pressed slack shoes too clean for this rain-soaked driveway. He didn't knock. Just opened the door like he still had a key to my world. I won't stay long, he said, not meeting my eyes. Mom stepped aside, her mouth tight. She walked past us, out to the back porch. Colt and I stood in the narrow hallway that smelled like old wood and lemon polish. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. A non-disclosure agreement, he said. If you sign it, my father will ensure you're undisturbed. No more blocked accounts. You'll be left alone. I didn't move. He continued. You don't have to struggle. You just have to be quiet. I stared at the paper in his hand, the same hand that used to brush my hair back when I couldn't sleep, the same hand that signed the birth certificate of a boy we'd buried. You think I'd take hush money, I asked, not raising my voice. It's not money, he said, as if that made it better. It's peace. I let the silence sit between us. Then I stepped past him into the kitchen. The envelope with my father's records still lay open. Colt followed my gaze but didn't seem to understand what he was looking at. I turned back toward him. I see what your family does to people. My father, me, Eli, my mother, one by one. Quietly. You take pieces. Colt didn't respond. I walked to the door and opened it. He lingered a second like he expected something else. An outburst, a tear, a last plea. But I said nothing. He walked out, and the click of the lock echoed through the hallway as I slid it shut behind him. The backroom door groaned when it opened, air thick with aged wood mildew and the faint, stubborn trace of my father's aftershave, the kind he used to splash on before Sunday church, even after he'd stopped going. No one had touched the space since the funeral. Not even Mom. Dust clung to every corner, like an accusation. I closed it behind me, sealing off the rest of the world. Outside, rain whispered steadily, barely louder than the tired ceiling fan, clicking once every few seconds as it dragged through another rotation. The laptop sat beneath a stack of papers on my dad's old desk, an outdated machine I hadn't used since the early days at Sterling Group. I'd almost forgotten I'd packed it. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed to touch something from the life I used to have before grief turned everything sharp. I plugged it in. The light on the charger blinked to life surprisingly. I pressed the power button and waited. The fan inside wheezed, the screen flickered, and then the login prompt appeared. I typed the password without thinking. It accepted me on the first try. The desktop looked like a time capsule. There were photos of Eli of Colt, even one of the Sterling family estate during some winter party where I had stood in the corner clutching a flute of champagne like a prop. I ignored those and opened the folders I didn't recognize. Inside one labeled Audio Backup Temp. There were only 5 files. One was dated just 2 days before they let me go. Curiosity nudged me. I clicked play. At first, it was just low murmuring, then a voice came into focus. Crisp, clear, unmistakable. Gregory Sterling. Arthur. He's nothing but an old ghost. I had people clean that up years ago. His boy long gone. We don't leave strings hanging. Then another voice, young, cautious. A man I didn't recognize. Are you saying I'm saying I don't tolerate risk? Gregory snapped. You want to stay on this payroll, you learn that fast. My hand shot to my mouth. I played it again, this time all the way through. Gregory didn't stutter, didn't hint. He admitted it plainly, as if brushing off a minor administrative task. Arthur had told me he lost a child, a son. He'd never said how, never gave me details. Now I knew why. My stomach turned. I backed out of the file and stared at the screen, then at my reflection in the darkened window. My skin looked pale sallow. My lips had gone dry. Arthur had trusted me with a number scrawled on a torn napkin. I hadn't called him since our meeting in the abandoned diner. But now I knew why he'd chosen me, why he didn't give up. I reached for my phone and scrolled to the contact. Hello? His voice was scratchy but alert. I heard it, I said. There was a pause. Which one? The recording. The one where Gregory talks about Arthur's son. Another pause, heavier. Then I assume you understand. Yes, I whispered. I do. And I looked around the room at the closed curtains, the rain sliding down glass, the duffel bag still hanging by the door. I'm ready. Silence. Not just for me, I continued. We do this for everyone, he silenced. A breath crackled through the line. Meet me tomorrow. Bring the file. I'll bring the rest. The call ended without another word. I stood frozen for a moment, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the line had gone dead. Then I moved. I retrieved the USB from the drawer and saved the recording, found an old notebook and scribbled down a timeline. I didn't know what Arthur had been collecting all these years, but I had just uncovered something that would burn down the walls Gregory had built. In the hallway, I passed the living room where Mom was folding laundry while the TV murmured an old sitcom in the background. She didn't ask where I was going, didn't even look up. But when I paused by the door, she said, "Take your father's coat. It's colder than it looks." Her voice was steady, but something in it, something just beneath, let me know she understood. The coat hung heavy in my hands, coarse fabric lined with worn flannel. Slipping it on, I felt the weight anchor me. The USB drive slid neatly into the inside pocket. I pulled the door open, cold air brushing my face as I stepped out into the dark. The elevator groaned as it climbed cables humming through the shaft. Inside my coat, the flash drive pressed against my ribs, steady and insistent like a second pulse I couldn't quiet. Floor 13. The doors parted with a sigh. The hallway outside the law office was silent, carpet muffling every step. Sleek panels, frosted glass, minimalist decor. It was a place designed to impress and intimidate at once. But today I felt none of it. I stepped into the office, and there he was, Colt, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, his silhouette outlined by the gray-blue sweep of the Mississippi River behind him. He looked smaller somehow. Maybe it was the suit. Maybe it was the absence of a crown he never deserved. He turned when he heard my footsteps. His eyes searched mine, but I didn't offer warmth. He didn't deserve recognition. Not anymore. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. Just a shallow nod, and then I took my seat across the polished oak table. His lawyer spoke first, a middle-aged man with a voice like sandpaper and a smile stretched too thin. We're prepared to offer a generous settlement. He began sliding a thick envelope toward me. 7 figures tax-advantaged with a clause of full non-disclosure. We believe it's in everyone's best interest to avoid unnecessary noise. I didn't touch the envelope. I looked at Colt instead. His mouth was set in a tight line as if even this was beneath him. "Do you remember Eli's first cry?" I asked softly. Colt blinked. His jaw twitched, but he said nothing. It was 3:12 a.m. I continued. The nurses were rushing. I couldn't see him yet. But you did. You were standing right there, and you looked at him like... Like he was the answer to a question you didn't even know you'd been asking. Still no response. Just a shallow breath and the tiniest shake of the head. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small white envelope. Inside was a printed transcript, partial, redacted, carefully selected. I slid it across the table, placing it right beside the money they thought would silence me. "Your father," I said, "has a habit of cleaning up messes, including people. This is a transcript from a call I recovered. He talks about Arthur and Arthur's son. It's unsettling." The lawyer reached for it, flipping through the pages, his eyes narrowing. Colt leaned forward now, just slightly, finally registering that this wasn't a bluff. "That's a serious accusation," he said. I tilted my head. It's not an accusation, just a glimpse. They didn't know I still had the full file, the original audio, names, dates, the rest of the iceberg buried below. Colt exhaled slowly. "What do you want, Lena?" The name landed like a pebble in still water. My name. Not Babe, not Mrs. Sterling. Just Lena. And he said it like he didn't know me anymore. "What I want," I repeated carefully. I stood. I want to remember my son without shame. I want to stop waking up wondering what new thing will be taken from me. I want my name back, my voice, and I want your father to stop ruining people's lives and pretending it's business. Colt's knuckles whitened on the table. His lawyer opened his mouth, but Colt raised a hand. The room went silent again. I picked up the envelope of money and slid it back across. "I don't want your silence," I said. "I want the truth." And then I walked out. Halfway down the hallway, I heard his voice echo behind me. "Lena." I stopped. "If you take this public," he said quieter. "Now my father won't just come after you. He'll destroy you. He always does." I turned my head just enough to see his reflection in the glass. His face a mix of fear and something else. Helplessness. "You think I don't know that?" I replied, not turning around. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing leaves along the sidewalk like they were desperate to escape the season itself. I drew the coat tighter as the building's door clicked shut behind me. The river moved beside the street, strong, steady, indifferent. I let its rhythm guide my steps until the glow of a neon sign flickered ahead. The bar reeked of spilled whiskey and broken promises, its sign buzzing faintly above the door. I tugged the gray knit cap lower over my forehead and slipped inside, taking the far booth beneath the jittering neon light. My gaze swept the room, pausing when he walked in. Older, now thinner, his shirt, wrinkled shoes, scuffed. 3 years hadn't passed, gently shame carved faster than time. "Darren," I murmured when he slid into the booth across from me. He didn't smile, just nodded once like this was a transaction, not a reunion. "You weren't followed?" he asked, voice low. "I came through the delivery entrance of the bakery next door," I said. "They still owe my mom a favor." His mouth twitched, almost a grin. "Of course they do. Darlene was a damn legend at cake decorating." We let that moment settle for a second. Then he leaned in. "I don't know why you're poking this hornet's nest, Lena. People who do don't sleep easy after." I didn't flinch. I haven't slept easy since Eli died. He looked away, jaw tightening. Then slowly he pulled out a worn flash drive wrapped in a napkin. "I never planned to keep it," he said. "It just felt wrong to delete everything." There were nights Gregory made us turn off cameras. He'd bring in external consultants, fake investment reports, even falsified deadlines to corner competitors. I didn't even realize how deep it went until Arthur refused to sign off on a particular deal. Back in 2018, I asked. Darren nodded. He wanted to protect the company's name. Gregory wanted to own the company's soul. I took the drive, gently slipped it into my coat. "What's on it?" "A meeting." "Just one." But it's the one where Gregory spells out how they inflated Sterling's value before the Bennett acquisition. The numbers didn't add up. They never did. He knew it. And Arthur got sick shortly after that, never stepped back in the building again. We sat in silence. The bartender switched the TV channel to a news station just in time for another Sterling stock report. Investors were still blind. For now. Darren stood. I didn't see you. You didn't see me. Understood, I said. But as he turned, I caught his hand for a second. You did the right thing. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. Arthur cried when I showed him the footage. Not out of sadness, out of vindication. I thought I was going mad, he whispered, hands shaking as the video played. Gregory gaslit the board, told them I was losing grip, that I'd misread the data. He paid off the compliance officer and buried everything. You were the only one who said no, I replied, watching his eyes glisten. And you were right. For the first time, I saw the man beyond the shadows. Not just a forgotten patriarch, but a leader who'd been silenced before his legacy could take root. The next day, we met in a rented office above an old laundromat with a pair of journalists from an independent media collective. They were young, smart, and unafraid of billionaires. Arthur sat across from them, hands folded tightly in his lap, while I laid out the timeline, the flash drive, the transcripts. Not once did I mention my last name. I'm not doing this for revenge, I told them. I'm doing it because too many people keep quiet and suffer alone. I'm not one of them anymore. We agreed to release the video under a pseudonym, anonymous but traceable enough for anyone paying attention to connect the dots. When it went live 3 days later, the effect was immediate. Sterling Group's stock dropped 12% within hours. The clip was everywhere: news feeds, Reddit threads, finance blogs. Gregory's voice, casual and smug, saying, "Numbers don't have to be real. They just have to be persuasive. No boardroom could spin that away." But what struck me most wasn't the backlash. It was seeing my name, not Mrs. Colt Sterling, not Sterling widow, just Lena Hartwell, source behind explosive whistleblower leak. My name, my story, my voice. Arthur called that night. "They're scrambling," he said. "Damage control meetings, crisis PR teams, private investigators trying to trace the leak. Let them look," I said. "They'll never find the original." We didn't celebrate. There was too much left undone. But something shifted. I no longer walked into rooms wondering how small I needed to be to survive them. And Arthur. He stood taller. My phone buzzed before I could speak again. Unknown number. Just 2 words they know. Arthur's face drained of color. A silence heavier than victory pressed between us as I rose, already reaching for my bag. The elevator groaned upward each floor, ticking past like a countdown. My grip tightened around the strap of the bag as the 29th button glowed. The door slid open into air that reeked faintly of leather mahogany and old cologne wealth embalmed, soured by something stale beneath it. No assistant waited. No security cleared me. Just a corridor hushed like a courtroom before the verdict. Gregory Sterling sat at the head of the lacquered table posture, carved from arrogance. Press suit, pristine cuffs, a watch worth more than my car. He didn't rise when I entered, didn't smile. "Sit," he said, as if I were still the young intern Colt brought to Christmas dinner, too shy to meet his eyes. I didn't. He raised a brow. Still playing dramatic, I thought motherhood might have taught you some humility. I took the chair closest to the exit, not out of fear, just caution. The man across from me had spent decades bending the world until it obeyed him. No one like that ever accepts the idea of losing quietly. He leaned back, gaze sharp. "Let's be civil. You've caused enough trouble, Lena, for yourself, for this family. But I'm offering you one final opportunity. You drop everything, your statement, the footage, the noise you've stirred, and in return you'll receive a clean payout. More than fair. We seal it with an NDA. You disappear quietly with dignity." I didn't blink. "You think I care about money?" Gregory's mouth curled slightly. "No, but you care about your mother. And I happen to know the hospital bills haven't stopped arriving." I set my bag on the table, slow, deliberate. My fingers brushed against the zipper, but I didn't open it yet, just held his gaze. You really think that's going to scare me? Everyone has something to protect, he said, voice smooth, almost amused. Your mother has a medical history she wouldn't want in public hands. One call Lena. That's all it takes. You're right, I said, finally unzipping the bag. Gregory sat forward slightly. I pulled out nothing, just looked him dead in the eyes and whispered, "But you're wrong about one thing." He didn't move, but I saw it a shift, the tiniest crease in his brow. My mother's already been broken. You didn't start with me, Gregory. You started with her when you turned my father away from the ER for not having your brand of health insurance. He stilled. She lost her husband because of you, and then she watched me marry into the very family that took him. Stillness stretched across the table like a rope pulled taut. She has nothing left to lose, I added, which makes her more dangerous than both of us. Gregory laughed. Not a chuckle, an actual laugh, sharp and hollow. You think you're clever, don't you? That this little stunt gives you leverage. I built this company with my hands, my blood. You and Arthur and the rest of the Bleeding Hearts, you wouldn't last a week in my shoes. No, I said, because I wouldn't trample people to stay standing. His face hardened. You ungrateful little girl, I took you in, elevated you. You were nothing before Colt. You mean before I gave up my name, before I was reduced to Mrs. Colt Sterling on a name tag at a family board meeting? He flinched. You don't get it, I went on. Sterling isn't a name anymore. It's a rot, and people are starting to smell it. You think anyone will side with you, he hissed. They already are. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Too busy locking yourself in this cage of your own legacy. You built it to keep control, but now it's closing in. His fingers tapped the table now, rapid, restless. You think you're free, he sneered. You've made enemies that don't forget. This isn't a win for you, Lena. It's a countdown. I stood slowly slinging the bag over my shoulder, then let it tick. I said barely more than a whisper. He didn't follow me, didn't call out, but as I pushed the glass door open, I caught my reflection in it and his behind me, smaller than I remembered. Not a giant, not a monster, just a man clinging to a crumbling empire, whispering threats into an echo chamber. The elevator doors slid shut and my phone buzzed, one word from Arthur ready. My thumb hovered over the screen as the numbers climbed higher. The doors parted with a soft ding. Fluorescent light spilled into the hushed corridor, bouncing off marble polished to a sterile shine. Each step of my heels carried me closer to the conference room, the infamous boardroom perched at the crown of Sterling Group's ceiling, made of glass that forced you to look up even when you didn't want to. Above the sky loomed pale and undecided, like it couldn't choose whether to hold or finally break. Inside, the atmosphere pulsed with tension. The board members sat along the curved table faces, unreadable designer suits perfectly pressed. Some avoided eye contact. A few glanced at me, then quickly turned away. Reporters weren't allowed in, but everyone knew what had brought us here. The leak had gone viral 2 nights ago. Gregory Sterling's voice had slithered through every major channel and every late-night clip. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't admitted it either. He'd simply disappeared from public view. Until this meeting. Gregory sat at the head of the table, jaw-tight eyes narrowed like a predator surveying a cornered animal. But I wasn't prey anymore. Arthur sat beside me, frail but steady, his cane resting against the side of his chair. I glanced at him. He didn't speak. He hadn't said a word since we got in the car, but his silence was weighty, deliberate. He was here to witness. Ms. Sterling, one of the board members, said, "No, not Sterling anymore. Lena Foster." That's what my badge read today. "You asked to address the board," he continued. I nodded. "Yes, I won't take much of your time." I stepped forward. I could sense Gregory's discomfort even before I looked at him like heat rising from asphalt. I didn't look at him yet. I used to be called the shadow of this company, I said. The quiet wife, the silent operator, the woman behind the curtain. Several members shifted in their seats, but shadows see everything, I continued. and now the world is starting to see too. I pulled a small remote from my pocket and pressed play. The audio crackled. Gregory's voice emerged unmistakably him. Arthur's old. He'll forget. I've handled bigger threats than a has-been with regrets. And Lena, she'll fold. She always does. The silence that followed was sharp. Gregory's expression didn't change, but the color in his face drained slightly. Colt, who sat 2 chairs down from his father, leaned forward, elbows on the table. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. "That's just a fraction of what we've uncovered," I said calmly. "Financial manipulation, internal fraud, deliberate misinformation to investors, and the blacklisting of employees who refuse to be complicit." I paused. My voice didn't shake, including myself. Gregory finally stood, both hands planted on the table. "This is character assassination," he growled. "All of you know me. You've worked with me. She's bitter, vindictive. She has nothing left and wants to take me down with her." I turned to him. "You're wrong," I said softly. "I have everything left, everything you couldn't touch." His eyes narrowed. Like what I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The murmurs around the table were already swelling. Colt opened his mouth but said nothing. His silence was louder than anything he could have spoken. One of the older board members cleared her throat. "We've heard enough." A vote was called. 11 hands raised for immediate suspension and legal investigation. 1 abstention. Gregory didn't wait to be escorted out. He stormed from the room, but the echo of his shoes across the tile sounded smaller than I remembered. I stood still, not triumphant, just still. Something in my chest unclenched. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer cared whether he lost. Outside, the first drops of rain touched the glass ceiling above us, tapping gently like a metronome. They spread, streaking across the panes, obscuring the once clear sky. Arthur leaned closer and whispered, "It's starting." I nodded, slipping the folded document back into my bag as the storm thickened overhead. By morning, I was standing at the courthouse counter, sliding my paperwork across the scratched ledge. The clerk behind the plexiglass barely glanced up, just tapped at her keyboard before asking, "You're requesting a full legal name change from Lena Sterling to Lena Morley. Do you want the previous name retained on file or—" "No," I said steady and low. "Erase it. I don't want anything left." She didn't press further, just clicked again. Outside the window of the courthouse, a tree bent under a sluggish breeze, its branches tapping gently against the glass, like they too were waiting for something to be finalized. The room smelled faintly of old ink and fresh toner, bureaucratic and bland. But to me, it felt like clean air. It wasn't about the name alone. It never was. Sterling had clung to me like smoke, suffocating, invisible, hard to wash out. Now with each letter I left behind, I felt a layer peel away. Gregory was in holding. The court had denied bail. Multiple charges, fraud, market manipulation, witness, intimidation, stacked against him like brittle dominoes. Sterling Group's stock had been frozen for review, and federal investigators had seized hard drives from the corporate office. Colt had issued a 1-paragraph resignation via his lawyer. No press conference, no, we were misled. Just silence. No one reached out, not from the family, not from the company, and I didn't need them to. I wasn't waiting for redemption. That implied someone else had the power to give it to me. What I got instead was something quieter and far more mine. The night after the boardroom explosion, I received an email. No subject line. Just a short message. "I've waited years for someone to say what we couldn't. Thank you." It was signed with initials. I recognized someone who had trained me years ago who vanished after standing up to Gregory in a budget meeting. A few more trickled in. A tech from my old department. A junior analyst. Even a former janitor who remembered me staying late and asking his name. They didn't owe me those words, but they gave them anyway. That was enough. I walked out of the courthouse holding the official document sealed in a stiff yellow envelope. The air hit warmer than it had in weeks, though maybe it was just the tension finally loosening inside my chest. I didn't take the train home. I walked instead, one block at a time, following memory instead of sidewalks. Somewhere along the way, I passed the old park again. The bench was still there, worn, weather-bitten, slouched into the ground like it was tired of waiting. No one sat on it. The man who had offered me an escape route with a single sentence, he wasn't there. But somehow I felt him. I sat anyway. Reaching into my coat pocket, I pulled out the slip of paper he'd given me. The ink had smeared. The numbers were barely legible, like the past trying to dissolve itself. But I hadn't thrown it away, not even after all this time. It had traveled with me through grief, through shame, through the ash of who I had once been. I held it up to the light. I could still make out part of his handwriting, the curve of the 3, the tail of the 7, the smudge of the last word, escape. He never promised freedom, just a way out. I took it, and I made it my own. Someone passed behind me, a jogger breathing heavy. I didn't look. I just folded the paper once more, tucked it back into the inside lining of my coat, and let my eyes wander up to the trees. They were starting to bud again. I exhaled. My son's name had never been printed on a birth certificate. They hadn't given us time, but in my mind, I repeated it. Now Eli Morley. It rang clean. It rang like something unbroken. He didn't need justice served on a silver platter. He just needed his mother to show up to survive, to step out of the shadows, carrying the name she chose, not one inherited from a cage. And I had. The hill was quiet, carpeted in thinning grass and scattered leaves. The air smelled like cedar and earth, and the kind of cold that doesn't sting, just settles into your collar and stays. It was fall, in the way I liked best, unapologetic, wind-creased, stripped bare of decoration. I walked up the slope slowly, my boots brushing against the amber litter of last week's wind. The flowers in my hand weren't fancy, just a handful of white daisies slightly wilted, wrapped in brown paper. Eli didn't need grand things. The headstone was small. I had chosen the simplest design, just his name and the date. No poems, no angels, no desperate carvings to make sense of what never would. Just the truth, Eli Morley, and the space he left behind. I crouched down and placed the bouquet at the base. Then gently, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the hospital bracelet. The plastic was worn and yellowed now, the ink faded to near invisibility, but I could still trace the curve of the E with my thumb. I set it next to the flowers. "You'd be so tall now," I murmured. Probably chasing ducks or drawing on the walls. I wasn't crying. I hadn't cried in months. It's not that I'd stopped grieving, I just stopped bleeding. There's a difference. I did something, I whispered. Something you would have been proud of. I didn't let them bury me with you. The wind curled around my ears, lifting the hem of my coat. A leaf danced in the air beside me and landed with a soft click on the headstone. I sat down on the damp ground legs folded beneath me, and for the first time in a long time, I spoke to him like I used to talk to myself in the mirror, carefully. Quietly, not expecting a reply, just needing to be heard. I had to learn how to breathe again. That first morning, I stood at the kitchen sink and I didn't know what to do with my hands. I poured coffee just to give them something to hold, and I sipped it like it might teach me how to be human again. I looked at my fingers. No ring, no band, just skin and history. I thought healing would feel like fireworks. It didn't. It felt like silence. Like walking into a room and not flinching when someone said my name. The right name. I leaned back slightly, hands bracing behind me. The sun was moving slow through the clouds, low and golden, catching in the branches, like it wanted to rest too. People still ask what happened. They want the scandal, the headlines. But that's not what mattered. What mattered was this. I chose where to sit. I chose when to speak. And no one talked over me. I smiled, not wide, but real. A twitch of truth at the corner of my mouth. They don't say sorry, Eli. The ones who hurt you, who erase you, they don't apologize. They vanish. And somehow you're left to be both witness and survivor. A bird landed nearby. It tilted its head, then flew off again unconcerned. I let the moment pass. I used to think I needed them to give me my name back, I said. But I didn't. I just had to stop waiting for permission. I stayed there a while, long enough for the shadows to shift, for the sounds of the town to rise and settle again. No one interrupted. No phones, no threats, just air, just sky. Just the name Morley engraved in stone and stitched back into my skin. Eventually, I stood up. My knees ached a little. I didn't mind. As I turned to walk down the hill, a gust of wind sent a swirl of leaves tumbling past my boots. One brushed my cheek on the way down, dry and light like a whisper. I didn't brush it away. I let it fall. There was a sound in the distance, small, metallic. I paused and tilted my head. A wind chime. Faint, hollow like memory. Like the one that used to hang from the porch of the house where I first learned to lie awake listening to storms. Where I once believed silence was safety. It wasn't. But now it was something else entirely. Freedom. I didn't look back. You know, I used to think survival meant staying quiet, not rocking the boat, not causing trouble. But silence doesn't protect you, it just delays the fall. I didn't win in a courtroom. I didn't get an apology. But I got something more powerful than all of that. I got my name back. So let me ask you this. What would you reclaim if no one could stop you? If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll stick around. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that speak the truth softly, but never weakly.